all I ever preach is the good news, like R.C. Sproul says, if all I ever preach is the good news, guess what? The good news becomes, and not the bad news, the good news becomes no news at all. So until I have a conception or idea of my wretchedness and sinfulness, the sinfulness of sin, as the Puritans used to say, then I will have the good news will mean nothing to me. What would it mean to me that I've been saved from a lion as I'm walking down the street and there's a lion in the thicket and I walk by it and it doesn't attack me and I don't know it's there? It's not going to mean anything to me if somebody comes up to me and says, hey man, you just got saved. That lion, you just got saved by a lion attacking you. I'll be like, okay, whatever. It's not going to make any sense to me. It's not going to be good news to me because I'm not going to understand the fact that I just walked past a lion that did rip my head off. So I need to understand about the lion that's waiting right there. I need to understand the sinfulness of my sin. So when we have all had this sin nature passed down to us, and if you think I'm wrong, look at a baby. You don't have to teach a baby to lie. You don't have to teach a baby to cry and demand things from you. You don't have to teach a baby to be selfish. You don't have to teach a babi. There's one, I forgot who it was, but he said, show a baby your watch or something, right? Something shiny. And that baby's going to squirm and want it, and you pull that watch away. And that baby's going to squirm and want it, and you pull it away again. That baby's going to kick and squirm and yell and fight and be angry because it wants that thing you're not giving it. And if that baby had the strength of a 20-year-old man, it would murder its parents and walk out of the house leaving a footsteps of blood and carrying that watch and not think twice about it. So, human beings, we are born innately and fundamentally absolutely corrupt. We're also born with a sense of judgment, right? So, if when you're reading the newspaper and you hear like something horrible that happened, and you say, man, I'm really angry that this happened, right? You have what's called righteous indignation. So should we exclude God should we deny God this right to have righteous indignation against us and our sin? You know why I talk about sin so much to you guys? It's because I want you to love God. Paul Washer even told his congregation this. Well, he was asked one time, and he's right. And why? Well, you might say, well, how is it that I can love God by knowing about my sin? Because until I know about what I've been saved from, and the just, righteous demands of a holy God against my sin, because He's good and righteous, then I'm not going to really love God until I understand this thing called the gospel. The more I understand this gospel, the more I'm going to cling to Christ. Because most people think that, I'm just going to live a good life and not kill anybody, and then I'm going to somehow get to heaven. Most people think that, I'm not as bad as Jeffrey Dahmer, and we judge ourselves amongst ourselves, by ourselves, and which is not wise. You ask anybody why they think they're going to go to heaven, they're going to tell you, I'm a pretty good guy. Go to work every week, take care of my family, don't beat my wife. But is that really going to get me into heaven when one sin plunged the universe into chaos and corruption and disease? When one bite of a fruit, not to minimize sin, but think about it, one bite of a fruit sent the entire universe into corruption and chaos and disease. Every miscarriage, every abortion, every child sacrifice, every cancer patient that died, all a result of one sin. So how is it that we could think that we're going to be able to get into heaven when I know I've sinned way more than once? How would it even be logical for me to think that I could somehow tip the scales in my favor when I have incurred an infinite debt, sinning against an infinite God? It's impossible. It's ludicrous. It's illogical, unrational to think that.
Yes, sir.
So we have this bad situation that we have. God is good. We are not. What is God supposed to do with the wicked person? Judge him, send him to hell. Would He be unrighteous in doing that? No. He'd be just and righteous and holy for doing it. So how do we alleviate this problem? God's good and we're not. What do we do? What solves this issue? How do we pay this infinite debt that we've incurred because of our sin? It's not by living a good life, that's for sure. The spring of the Christian's obedience is his love for God's gospel. The love that we have for what God has done for us. The love that we have for Christ. The more we probe the beauty and depth of riches of Christ, the more we're going to be driven to holiness. The more we're going to be driven to obedience. Because Christianity isn't about fulfilling a bunch of rules. God doesn't want us to be devoted to a bunch of rules. He wants us to be devoted to Himself for what He's done for us. He didn't have to save us. He didn't have to save us. So, where does my obedience need to stem from? Because I remember a time, like I've said before, I walked in quite a bit of joy, prideful joy. And it was associated with the fact that I was obedient to every known command. I was looking at a life sentence, like I've told you guys before, in Louisiana. And so I picked up the Bible and started to do everything that it said. Why? Because I wanted to somehow, and my theology was wrong, but I wanted somehow to appease God so that He would deliver me from this 20-year sentence. I wanted to somehow get in His favor to get delivered from this 20-year sentence. So when the Bible said, don't look at women lustfully, I didn't. When it said, don't lie, I didn't. When it said, bring every thought into captivity to the obedience of Christ, I did it. That's the first verse God caused me to memorize. Sacan todos los pensamientos de obediencia de Cristo. Esto es un verso muy, muy importante en la Biblia. Yo no sé si hablan correcto, pero sacan todos los pensamientos por la obediencia de Jesús. ¿Sí entiende? Ándale. Disculpe, mi español no está 100%. Me enseña en la calle. So, I'm trying to translate some of the things that I'm saying to our Latin friends here because I love them. And down there, if they know I speak Spanish and all I do is speak English, it's very offensive. So, I don't want to offend anybody. But so, back to my point. When I was trying to appease God, right, through my own efforts, and because I knew that only God could deliver me, I was really kind of up in the air, maybe as to whether or not for sure He existed. I believed He did. I thought He did. I was told He did as a kid, and then after that experience that I had in the jail there, now I know for a fact there's no denying it. But let me. I don't want your faith to rely on logic or human cunning craftiness of words of men. But think about this for a second. All the people that have lived, the kids that are born that messed up, right? And they didn't do anything to deserve it. But they like my twin sister, born with cerebral palsy. So now, where is she going to get justice? If we're justice and como se dice, we're justice to have any value, or we're ethics to have any value, we must surpass the grave. There must be life after the grave. There must be a judgment seat after the grave. After the grave, there has to be a judgment seat. Otherwise, goodness has no value. Badness has no value. Everything's arbitrary. Everything's is just we're all dancing to the tune of our DNA, as Dawkins says. So logic would say there has to be a judgment seat after the grave. And it would say that in order for ethics and moral rectitude to have any meaning. And so, but it also says, when you think about this, it also says that there has to be a judge. I'll use Rabbi Zechariah's description, which I really enjoy. Excuse me again. He says, somebody comes to him and says, if God is real, God is holy, and God is all loving and all powerful, why is there evil? So this is a good question. Kinda. It assumes that God has done nothing. But in actuality, He has. On that cross, He dealt a death blow to the enemy. He dealt a death blow to the grave. He dealt a death blow to evil. And evil is a no thing. Like I've said before, it has no ontological essence. Meaning, ontology is the branch of metaphysics that has to do with the idea of beginnings. So evil has always been described in two ways. Privation, privación, and negation, negación. So you have privation and negation. What do those words mean? Negation means to negate, meaning to be neglected, right? So it's lacking something. Privation means to be prohibited of something, to be deprived of something, right? So evil is a no thing.